In the most recent patch, as of yesterday, GGG changed the way that the Electrocute support gem works and how Electrocute buildup works. And I have to say that putting it in my build now, it has been pretty awesome. So as you can see in the footage in front of you, I am electrocuting with my Spark very quickly, very efficiently. Electrocute is a new ailment in Path of Exile 2, if you come from PoE 1, that now is very similar to Freeze, honestly, possibly better than Freeze, in that it can build up, just like Freeze does, and when you hit the threshold where it reaches its climax, then the monster will be stunned for 5 seconds. So before the patch yesterday, the Electrocute support gem used to have 40% less damage. This meant that you basically only used it in a support or utility skill, and I used to use it in my Orb of Storms. I didn't get a ton of Electrocutes, but I usually would get maybe one towards the end of killing a rare, and if it was a longer boss fight, maybe one towards the end of the boss dying. They did lower the Electrocute buildup by 25% in the patch notes. However, the difference between 40% less damage being removed and 20% slower Electrocute buildup is massive. The amount of Electrocute buildup that happens is based on the amount of damage that you do. And so since you can now put this support gem, if you're willing to sacrifice a pure damage gem, in your main links, then you will be doing much, much more damage and you will notice much more Electrocute buildup. As you can see in the footage, monsters either die really quickly, white monsters, and blue and rare monsters will get electrocuted almost immediately. I would say 2 to 3 of my sparks hitting a rare monster will electrocute it, and then I have 5 full seconds of DPS. I could put in something like Control Destruction, do 30% more damage, and arguably maybe kill that monster quicker, but particularly for harder rares that might have plus 50 lightning resistance, etc., much harder to kill, I would rather than be stunned for 5 seconds and a much safer experience. In my current setup, I anointed Coursing Energy, which gives me 40% increased Electrocute buildup, as well as 30% shock chance against electrocuted enemies, but that doesn't really matter. It is a relatively inexpensive anoint. Disgust is the only one that costs anything, and at time of recording, it was about 8 exalts. In addition, you may consider anointing Electrocution. The problem is it has Suffering, which is very, very expensive. If you are in that area, Electrocution is really nice. 20% increased damage taken is gigantic. Or you could go for Electrotherapy, which, again, uses Suffering, unfortunately. I would use Electrotherapy if it was not so darn expensive. I believe Suffering is about 150 to 200 exalts right now. Thunderstruck is interesting. 50% increased Electrocute buildup against shocked enemies. This one is pretty compelling. However, the way that the Electrocute support gem works is your supported skill cannot shock. So your primary skill, when it's hitting the enemy, won't be shocking them. In my current build setup, I am using Orb of Storms with Conduction. However, I personally prefer just always having 40% increased instead of 50% increased when they're shocked from Orb of Storms, just so it's more consistent for off-screening Electrocutes on the monsters. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share with you guys today. If you are playing a build right now that does a lot of lightning damage and you can easily slot in Electrocute support without too much sacrifice, I strongly recommend giving it a shot. I'm doing the hardest maps that I can at the moment, and since slotting in Electrocute support, I have not died once. It is an incredible defensive layer. Monsters that don't move and don't attack don't do any damage. All right, and that's all I got for you. Give it a shot. Hope to see you guys on the stream soon. Goodbye.